tornado warning. You can probably hear the siren in the background. We're heading into the restroom to wait it out.
Hey, welcome back to the channel, everybody. Today we're going to do something a little different, perhaps something that a lot of RVers, full-time RVers anyway, or even part-timers don't often think about. And that is, what do we do in the case of an emergency situation where we might have to leave our RV, whether we're camped out, boondocked somewhere in the remote wilderness, up on a mountain, is what happened to us when we were in South Dakota. But so today I just want to talk about how you might put a kit together so that you have everything in one bag. You need to bug out and get out of there in the case of an emergency situation. You grab the bag and go. It has everything in it that you might need for at least 72 hours. I do have a bit of training in emergency preparedness. I was in the military, of course, and anyone who's been in the military knows that you prepare for those sorts of scenarios, whether it be wartime scenario, natural disaster, whatever it might be. I was also a member of the Maryland Civil Air Patrol, and we had a fair amount of disaster preparedness training there. Just about any scenario, hurricanes, flooding, you name it. So I'm not an expert, but I do have a fair amount of training. So I do encourage you to go out and do your own research, put together a kit that works for you. This stuff works for us. It may not be applicable to you. In our case, it's a very simple, small, lightweight bag, and something we purchased off of Amazon. It's PVC waterproof, so that basically impervious unless it remains submerged for many, many hours underwater, which probably won't be the case. But anyway, it contains everything for 72 hours, and I'll pull the contents out and show you. But more importantly, it's a way for us to just, as I said earlier, grab the green bag and go. When we were in South Dakota and Colorado, we experienced several instances of severe weather tornado warnings where we had to get out of our rig, travel several miles down the mountain, in the case of South Dakota, to find shelter. And you know, the first couple of times we were kind of panicked. You know, when the emergency alert goes off and the tornado sirens go off, what to grab, and because we just weren't prepared. So after that, we said, no more of that. We're going to prepare ourselves so that all we have to do is grab our green bag and go. It contains everything that we will need, Sean and I, and also the dogs, all of their food or any medications that they might have. So that's what we decided to do. Okay, let's tear into the contents of the bag. One other feature of this particular bag, it has 3 different straps. You can sling it over your shoulder. It has 2 straps here to wear it as a backpack, which is a really nice feature. And we looked specifically for bags that had that feature so that we can sling it over our shoulder, and because we'll have many different things, a couple of dogs, and probably another bag or something, who knows. But primarily it'll be this, and it'll just be easier to sling it over our shoulder or wear it as a backpack. Okay, so our emergency kit contains basically 2 primary kits. That is the bag that contains our 72 hours worth of survival gear, if you will. It also contains a somewhat modified basic first aid kit. I do have a couple of different things in here, and I think it's important to kind of point out one that you might not always be thinking of in an emergency situation. So I do have a couple different small first aid kits, and they contain your typical stuff: gauze, antiseptic, bandages, things like that, a tourniquet in this one, so different things that you might run into. One thing I did decide to get to supplement the basic first aid kit is a trauma pack, and this is a quick clot trauma pack. So the contents of this, there's some gauze, there's some different wraps, some gloves, things that you might need in the case of a severe bleeding injury. And so you can open this up. There's a quick clot sponge inside. Say you have a severe laceration on your arm and you're bleeding profusely, you can take this quick clot sponge, apply that to the cut or wound. You can wrap it with the bandages and things that are in here. So I think this is a must-have in any emergency preparedness kit, because you never know when you might have a severe laceration that might be life-threatening, especially when you're many, many miles from any sort of medical care. So, a great addition. And I'll make sure I put the link to this in the description of the video. Alright, so that's our basic first aid kit. So the second most important thing, aside from the first aid kit in any emergency kit, is going to be some sort of weather radio. And I did quite a lot of research online and finally settled on this weather radio by Eton. Again, we're not endorsing this specific brand. We're not getting paid for having this as part of our channel. I just did a lot of research. One of the better brands out there in terms of its features and how long the battery lasts and things like that. Again, I'll be sure to put a link in the description. Well, what stood out on this particular one is that it has a solar charging panel. So it has an internal lithium battery. It can get charged by the solar panel. It can get charged with the crank. And it comes with a USB cable, so that if you had power somewhere, you could charge it via that. Another great feature of this is it will charge your cell phone or other sort of electronic either by the solar panel or by the crank. I think most people will primarily use the crank. Anyway, a great feature to have an extra charger for your cell phone, assuming you have cell coverage and things like that. I'm not going to go into the specifics of this, just suffice it to say that it did meet all the criteria that I had for a weather radio. The feature set was where I wanted it, and the price was affordable too. So anyway, a primary must-have in your kit. Alright, so now that we get into sort of the meat and potatoes of the kit, in any disaster or emergency scenario, you really want to focus, at least in my mind, on three things. And that is some sort of shelter, whatever that might look like for you. I'll show you what we've decided to include in our kit that would work for us. So shelter. Second being water, some sort of clean water source. A lot of disaster preparedness websites will tell you to have a gallon of water per person per day. It's a lot of water to lug around. I'll show you the option that we elected. And then third being food. You can survive a lot longer without food than you can with water. So in my mind, shelter primary, water, and then food. Alright, so for shelter, we decided to go with a Mylar survival tent. Now this is a pretty good sized survival tent. They're pretty tough, and again they retain obviously any sort of heat inside or outside, and it's pretty compact. So this would take care of Sean and I and the two dogs, no problem. Easy to put up, lightweight, and compact. Alright, for water, instead of carrying around the big bottles of or jugs of water, we elected to go with a Sawyer Mini Water Filtration System. Again, not endorsing this particular brand, it just seems to work for us. What's really nice about this is you can connect it to a water bottle. Let's say if you're out and you have no clean water source that you know of, take your water bottle, dip it into a stream or whatever, you connect the filter to the water bottle, and then you can drink out of the other end. You can also fill a bladder that comes with it, and you can also connect this in line to a hydration pack or a camel pack if you have those, which we do. So that might be something we would want to carry with us as well. So, lightweight, again, compact. You're not carrying around or lugging around all the big bottles or jugs of water, and it filters 100,000 gallons of water. Certainly enough for a 72-hour survival scenario. And it filters out all the really nasty stuff. 99.999% of contaminants, bacteria, cysts, giardia, things like that. That'll make your tummy sick. So again, a great option. I'll put a link in the description below for that. All right. So third, food. You want some sort of stable food source. For our emergency food source, I chose these emergency food ration bars. Pretty high in calories, mainly carbohydrates, sugars, those kinds of things that will give you energy in a survival scenario. Again, just for 72 hours. Not a 5-star cuisine by any means, but a decent food source. Not only do we have food for ourselves in our bag, we have food for the dogs. So obviously something you'll want to include in your bag is a 3-day supply for your dogs. Super important. Probably not going to want them eating your food. So that's really the 3 top things that we have in our kit. Now, again, your kit's going to vary based on your needs. Survival experts, emergency preparedness experts would recommend you have a change of clothing, up to 3 days. We figure that we could live in our clothing for 3 days, so that's not part of our bag. It would just make it larger, more bulky, and more difficult to cart around. So we talk about some of the personal needs you might have. That might be medication. Want to make sure that you have 3 days of at least 3 days of your medication for yourself and for your animals if they take medication as well. Another thing I think is smart to have is some quarters. Who knows, you might run into a situation where you're out of food, you might need something to eat, you find a vending machine, and all it takes is quarters. You have a couple rolls of quarters in your bag. That's always helpful. In our case, we just have a bunch of quarters in a little baggie. Alright, we'll talk about some other things that are nice to haves, not must-haves. I think it's important to have a good sturdy pair of gloves in your kit. You never know when you have to handle something that might be dangerous to handle. Wires, metals, things like that. So, good set of gloves. You never know if you're out in the wilderness and you need to shelter in place or something. You need a hatchet to cut some wood or hammer something with. So this is in our kit. Or maybe even self-defense. Who knows? Alright, next is lighting. We have a couple different sources of lighting. I've had this particular light for a number of years, and what I like about it is that it has 4 lights: white light, green, blue, and red. It's for different scenarios that you might encounter. Fog, you need night vision, or whatever. Nice thing, it has a clip. You can clip it on your shirt, clip it on the bill of your hat, which I've done before, like this, for hands-free. It articulates, which is nice, and the batteries are long-lasting. Always carry an extra set of batteries too. It doesn't hurt. One other lighting piece we have is a headlamp. These are great for hands-free viewing, obviously, and this has the same sort of light: white lights and green lights and red lights. Waterproof. Again, an extra set of batteries wouldn't hurt for that. Alright, so I have a little bag of odds and ends here, and so some of the odds and ends in this, they're just things that I put in a big Ziploc so that they're not floating around in the bag and just kind of all over the place. I think it's important to have some sort of tool set. This is a larger katana style knife, which is serrated for cutting wire and heavier, bulkier things, as well as chopping or chiseling. So that's a great option. A Leatherman, obviously any kind of multi-tool. Again, not endorsing this particular brand, just what I have and what I keep in the kit. Compass. Pretty important. Definitely have a compass. And some sort of strapping or webbing or cordage is always helpful. So this particular little kit here has some cordage and wire and tape and things in it. You never know when you might need that. And some space blankets. Got 2 space blankets. They'll keep you warm, lightweight, compact. That way you're not having to carry big blankets that might get wet or soaked. That, obviously you don't want that to happen. And a couple of ponchos. I think it's super important to have something that when you're out that will protect you from weather. And then fire. So a lot of people say that there are really 4 things you really want to consider in a survival scenario, and one of those being fire. I do agree to that to a certain degree, although fire is not necessary. Most people are not going to die unless you're in a Arctic situation from not having a fire. Nice to have, but not necessary. But I do keep a little tool. This is a little Flint style tool, fire starter. So that's a nice to have. And something that you may not always think about. Let's say if you need to shelter in place and your rig is inoperable, and for whatever reason you need to let people know you're in there. Nice big SOS flag. You can put that up on an antenna or something like that, or tape it to your window or something to let people know that you're there if you're sheltering in place. A lot of people would recommend putting a thumb drive in there, having copies of your driver's licenses, birth certificates, passports, whatever important documents you feel are necessary for that thumb drive. And again, make sure you put that thumb drive in some sort of sealed protective pouch within the primary bag so that it's protected from water or whatever. And I think you'll be all set. Okay, so again, there is no perfect kit. Definitely do your research. Put a kit together that works for you. I do highly recommend a bag that is absolutely waterproof, so that your contents inside aren't getting soaked or damaged from rain or whatever it might be. Well, that about does it for this video. Let us know if you have an emergency preparedness kit and what you might have in it. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer those. Any clarification on any of the items we have in ours, anything you suggest we add to ours that we haven't added already, we'd certainly appreciate that. Give us a big thumbs up if you haven't subscribed already. Go ahead and do that. Until next time, see ya.